Welcome, everybody. Today I have Dr. Mort Orman. He is one of the leading anger and stress elimination experts. Dr. Mort, thank you so much for coming. It's a real privilege to have you on the show.
It's my privilege, too. I'm happy to talk to you and your audience and share some knowledge about anger that most people probably haven't been exposed to before.
Brilliant. Thank you. First, very easy question. Where in the world are you?
I am in Florida, in the U.S., east coast of Florida, near Vero Beach.
Wonderful. And I hope you haven't been hit by too many storms recently.
No, the storms came more to the west side. We're on the east side,
Good.
so we didn't get hit as hard as the west side did.
Well, fingers crossed it stays that way. So, obviously, you being a practicing doctor for, I think it was 23 years and 40 years working with corporations, there's a whole range of things that you could cover with your background. So why stress and anger?
Well, I've been doing that for over 40 years now, both of them, because I thought, firstly, I had my own sort of personal breakthroughs in those areas. When I was in my 20s and 30s and going through medical training and opening up my practice, first few years of practice, I had a lot of anger, I had a lot of stress, a lot of relationship failures, one after another. Even though I was successful professionally, I didn't feel completely successful because I couldn't handle these problems. I couldn't stop, my emotional reactions, my anger, my anxiety, and other things going on. So I felt kind of like a failure in those areas. Of course, as a doctor, you don't let other people know that you're feeling that way.
Right.
You just put on the professional persona. But I knew inside that I wasn't feeling so great, and that I was suffering from stuff. Fortunately, I was young then, and it didn't really impact my health like I was seeing in some of my patients who were much older than I was. But it got me concerned that if I didn't figure it out somehow, and I tried all the standard stuff, and it just didn't really help that much, But if I didn't figure it out, I would end up like some of my patients, who got illnesses that were probably in some way related to chronic stress or chronic anger, things that I was seeing in my practice, and I didn't want to end up that way. So it got me into personal development work. And after a couple of years of personal development work, I finally put some things together and understood a bunch of stuff that I was never taught in medical school about human beings, which is really interesting because they send you out there to take care of human beings, and they teach you about, hearts and lungs and kidneys and livers and things like that, but they don't teach you a lot about the human beings that, have those organs and how to understand them, how to understand yourself as a person being a doctor and dealing with your emotions. I mean, most doctors are taught just not to have emotions, suppress them. But they're still there. They still play a role. So, yeah, it's kind of out of self-preservation that I got interested in it.
Fascinating, because you touched on some really interesting points then. One is doctors learn about the organs, or perhaps not the big organ that goes around all the little organs of the person himself, the suppression of emotions. And there are lots of different stereotypes of doctors, and there is a very big one around that sort of insensitive, house type character who is a medical genius, but not great with the people.
Yes.
Now, why did you
I would say that's true of most doctors when they graduate. The ones that are good at it kind of learn it on their own somehow, or figure it out, or maybe their families prepared them to begin with that. But they don't teach you, how to have a good bedside manner. They don't teach you how to really interact and particularly understand human beings and what's going on with them. So, yes, the personal development work filled in a lot of those holes for me.
I can imagine. Was there any personal development is always quite a long journey, but at what point did you go, I now know why the everyday ideas of how to manage stress and anger aren't working. I now know what to do differently. Did that take quite a while?
It did take a little while, and then there was like a breakthrough that happened where I finally understood, and a lot of it had to do with understanding the internal dynamics as opposed to the external situations, which everybody can see pretty easily. And usually, and most of the time, we blame our stress and our anger on things that are happening outside of us. And I did too. Okay. because that's what society kind of teaches us to do. And it was only when I realized that there was a lot of internal stuff going on that was actually causing the stress and causing the anger and the anxiety and the relationship failures and all that stuff. Then I got curious as to what that was and how does that actually happen? What are the details? It's not, you can globally come to that conclusion. Well, there must be some internal stuff going on, but that doesn't help you very much. You have to really be able to zero and pinpoint, it's like, if I'm angry, what exactly internally is causing my anger? How is my brain making me angry? What's it doing? And specifically, because once I know what it's doing specifically, then I can step in and intercede and maybe stop it or turn it around or not have it do that anymore. So that was the breakthrough when I finally got to that point of understanding where there was a precise understanding, not a vague, oh, well, there's probably something within me that's causing these reactions. No, I now know exactly what it is. And I discovered that 40 years ago, and I've been using that knowledge ever since, and it hasn't changed. It works every time now. Every time, if I should get angry now, which I don't do much anymore, I know exactly where it's coming from, 100%, never a doubt. It's never wrong. I know exactly what the internal causes are, and I can zero in on them. And I've taught other people to have that same skill. It's not really all that hard. It's just very few people are teaching it.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you, do you still ever get angry? And you've answered that already. I mean,
yeah, it's rare. It's very rare. It takes a lot. I mean, in my 20s and 30s, I got angry just at the drop of a dime. I mean, I took up tennis, for example, in my late 20s, and I was literally like John McEnroe on the tennis court. I don't know if you ever saw him in his heyday, but he was a hothead. He would, get angry at himself. He would smash his racket around. He would yell and scream on the court and all that kind of stuff. That's how I was. I wasn't the tennis player he was, skill-wise. But I could yell and scream just as well as he could. And again, these are things I couldn't control. Wasn't happy about it, but I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know what was, where it was actually coming from. If I would miss a shot or I'd lose a point I thought I should have won, if I could hit, 100 shots in practice, and then you flub one in a game, you get angry at yourself. So. And the same thing through my medical training, I would often get angry at myself if I didn't live up to whatever high standards I set for myself. So that was a problem that took me a while to cure for myself, but I finally did when I realized what was going on. So, and I'm happy during the interview, I'm happy to share what I learned with people so that they can have that same awareness, because it really is life changing. And
absolutely. Something I talk about a lot with some of my therapy clients is you can only control yourself. You can't control other people. And you have to kind of start by accepting that things that happen to you, it's up to you how you respond. But understanding why you respond is a really, really big part of it. So, I would definitely love to have your wisdom shared over what you've discovered and how you treat it, because
sure.
I've got your books and I've read about, you've got your website, everything else, and it's quite a unique, I say unique, but actually very common sense when you think about it approach to what you do. So
yeah. It's just it's not difficult. The problem is that we're talking about things that are invisible. You can't see them. So unless somebody's helped you understand that they're there, in other words, when we get angry, we don't see the internal causes of our anger. We just see the external causes. We have a blind spot. We cannot really understand the full process of how anger gets created. And then one of the things I frequently try to show people is in our society, we've all been taught to believe, and our common sense personal experience is that anger is like a 1-2 process, a cause effect, one causes two.
Mm-hmm.
So we see something we don't like, somebody behaves badly, doesn't do what they said they were going to do, lies to us, hurts us in some way, criticizes us. We see the one and we feel the two, which is the anger, and they come like right after each other. One comes after the other. And it looks like that's one causes two. End of story. That's what's going on. And that was my conception, in my 20s and 30s, when I was knocking my head against the wall, trying to figure out how to stop getting angry, and I couldn't succeed. I was missing the other puzzle pieces. There's actually 2 more puzzle pieces. It's actually a 4-step process for human beings. So what makes us angry, this is true for any other emotion, by the way, but if you just focus on anger, it's not 1, 2, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, with 4 being the anger that we feel. But there's 3 causal steps in the sequence before that, not 1.
Mm.
And then the second and third one are invisible. So most people walk around, they have no clarity on that those things have gotten activated inside them. And that's what's actually causing the emotion, not the external event. And we know this is true because you and a friend can be standing side by side, witness the exact same event. One of you will get angry and the other one won't.
Absolutely.
It's got to be internal, because the way you're looking at it, the way you're perceiving it, the way you're thinking about it, interpreting it. It can't be the event. It doesn't have the power by itself. It's only the initiator of the process. It's got to trigger the internal pieces for the anger to occur. And again, I mean, we should be teaching this in middle school and high school, kids to understand their emotions. That it's not 1, 2, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're not.
Yeah.
And that's what I learned 40 years ago. And it's been true ever since. And I've been teaching it to people ever since. And it really makes them tremendously powerful with regard to their emotions, that they never even imagined they could have that degree of control when you do get all 4 pieces of the puzzle and you know what they are. Okay. And again, they're not complicated. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to be a psychiatrist or psychologist. They're not complicated. They're just invisible. So
what are those hidden steps?
Yeah. So the first thing we have to realize is the second step, the first invisible one, is that our brain is always filtering things for us. We don't ever see reality as it actually happens. We don't see the truth about whatever takes place. We only see what our brain presents to us. And our brain, over millions of years of evolution, and because there's so much data coming into our senses, our brain can't process it all. It has to sort of simplify it a little bit and reduce the amount of data and chunk it down to make it simple so that we can make quick decisions, right? So, and our brain's been doing that for millions of years, and we inherited that kind of a technology in our brain. So our brain is always reducing things and cutting some things out and deciding what's important and what's not important, and then just showing us what it thinks is important and relevant. And it's leaving out a bunch of stuff, but it doesn't announce that. It doesn't come with a warning sign. Say, hey, the view of reality you have is missing a bunch of pieces. We had to do that, for your benefit. It just gives you this picture and says, this is reality, and there's nothing left out.
Yeah.
Okay. But a lot is left out. And so we always have these filters. We have hundreds and hundreds of different filters. So, for example, if you were 3 years old and you got bit by a dog one day, dog attacked you and bit you and hurt you, you're going to have a dog filter that you're going to carry through your life. And every time you see a dog, it's going to be, oh my God, that dog might bite. Where a person who didn't have that, traumatic experience as a kid may not have the same filter when a dog appears, Yeah. And they go, oh, nice dog, look at that. So we have all these filters. And all of our emotions come from specific ways our brain filters reality and presents it to us. So most emotions have 3 or 4 critical filters that actually cause the emotion, right? And so for anger, there's 3 main ones. And here they are. And people should write these down as I'm explaining them, because they'll understand from this point on, they'll never be confused why they get angry. They will know absolutely with 100% certainty why they get angry. So the first thing our brain tells us is that we're looking at something, somebody did something bad and wrong, bad or wrong that they shouldn't have done. So there's a negative judgment, a bad or wrong judgment. It could be a person, could be a thing. Something did something, or somebody did something bad or wrong that they definitely should not have done. The second filter is, as a result of that, somebody was hurt or harmed or negatively impacted. Could be us, could be somebody we care about, could be the planet. There's some negative, impact, some hurt or harm. Okay, so those are the first 2. And then the third one is whoever did the bad and wrong thing, we kind of have this narrow blame filter that says they were 100% responsible or to blame. So we only focus on their actions or lack of actions. We don't see any other causes that might have been in play. Even though they were there, we just have these blinders on, and the filter gives us these blinders where we just look at what they did. And when you have those three filters, one after another, somebody did something bad and wrong, somebody was hurt or harmed or negatively impacted, and they were 100% responsible to blame, your body creates the emotion of anger. Now, whenever you're experiencing anxiety, for example, you got three different filters, right? But there's still filters that are causing the reaction. Same for guilt or worry or frustration or sadness. The brain's presenting you a view of reality, and then you're believing that that is true, okay? So, for example, if you're working at your computer one day and you've spent a couple hours and you created this wonderful product of work that you're really proud of, and all of a sudden your computer goes on the fritz and your screen goes blank and you can't get it back, and you're getting angry and you feel like you want to punch your computer, why did you get angry? Why did your body react with anger? Well, your brain told you your computer was doing something it shouldn't be doing. It should continue to work the way you expect it to work. Way it should work. You're now negatively impacted because you can't continue to work, and maybe you might have even lost all that work that you spent all that time to do. It may not have been saved or backed up. And who was responsible or to blame for you being negatively impacted? The computer.
Absolutely.
So those are the three filters that immediately click in. And again, they're invisible and they happen automatically. But we're not consciously thinking that. But in the background, our brain is assuming those things are true. And by the way, that's the second invisible step. The first step is the brain gives us these three filters, and the second step is it tells us they're absolutely true.
Yeah,
they're not filtered. There's nothing left out. There's nothing inaccurate or incomplete. You can trust it. Our brain tells us. It's like the government saying, "I'm from the government. We're here to help, and you can trust me." That's what our brain is doing. It's like, here are the filters. That's my job. My job is to give you the filters. I'm doing my job, and I'm telling you that's all there is, and there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff, and you can trust me. And then when we do, we get the emotion. Okay.
And I've heard it from a neurolinguistic programming point of view. They talk about delete, distort, generalize, which is a more generalized description of what you just said, but I think it's really important people don't realize, particularly now as well, we've gone from processing something like, 64,000 bits of data a minute to 64 million. The numbers are ridiculous, but we're having so much more data at us.
Your brain can't process it all, and it never has been able to, even back in prehistoric times.
Yeah.
That it was not able to. But back then, our brains needed us to survive.
Yeah.
And that was one of their main roles. So the way they did that was we had to make quick, lightning fast decisions. Do I run or do I stay? Is this a threat or not a threat? Is this person I'm meeting, is it a friend or a foe? Is it good or bad? We had to make these either or decisions. So the brain had to chunk reality down to some very, small number of bits rather than the tremendous number that are in reality. So that we could make these lightning fast decisions and run if we had to, or fight if we had to. And the brain's been doing that ever since, and we don't realize a lot of the brains that we have now were fashioned and function based on things that happened millions of years ago, and through evolution and genetics, we inherit those tendencies. So that's how our brain is operating now, and neurolinguistic program sheds light on a lot of different ways our brains are programmed to function that we don't observe unless you go to a program like that where it teaches you to become observers of, what your brain's actually doing and how it's functioning, and how there's good things about that and there's negative things about that, and one of the negatives is you end up with a lot of negative emotions that are based on false views of reality that you think are true.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's even worse, because it's not just those 4 steps. I mean, it is. Every emotion has like those four kind of steps. But what happens with anger is there's another step that comes in with anger that's really tricky. So something happens, our brain gives us these three filters. It tells us they're true. Okay, we believe it's true, and then we get the emotion of anger. Now, what happens when we feel anger? When we feel anger, it makes us think we're right. It makes us feel we have righteous anger. That what we're seeing, we should be angry. We have a legitimate right to be angry because we're right about the filters. The problem, so we double down. In other words, we don't realize we're seeing filtered reality, and our brain is telling us it's true. But then we feel the emotion of anger, and the emotion of anger tells us we must be correct in our perceptions. When in fact, our anger actually came from faulty perceptions in one or more of those filters. But now we've put this layer of insulation around it where we can't question it because we have this emotion, and the emotion tells us we're right. So, and the emotion's actually lying to us, just like our brain is lying to us when it's giving us the three filters. So there's all this lying going on that we don't realize. So we think it's truth. We think we're living in a world where we're perceiving truth, and we're actually lying to ourselves. Our brain's lying to us. Other people are lying to us. The media is lying to us.
Everyone's lying, including ourselves.
We have a hard time seeing through all this lying. I mean, we're getting better with the media.
Yes.
We're starting to realize that the media is lying to us all the time, regardless of what media you listen to. They're always
applying their own filters.
Yeah, they're always filtering what they're presenting. The media is doing just what our brains do. The media don't tell you every story that ever happened in the world today.
Yeah, because
good or bad.
If they did, firstly, we wouldn't have the same thing for 7 days in a row. Because there's lots more going on.
In the first place, they cut out all the good stuff that happens. They only focus on the bad stuff, and then they can't show you all the bad stuff that happens. Okay, they can only show you some of it. You know, they don't have enough time. You know, or reporters to people to do it. So they decide. They say, "This is what I think." You know, the audience needs to see, and then they put their spin on it. This is how they need to think about it. Okay. Yeah. And so everybody's sort of coming to the awareness now that the media is filtering and the media is spinning, and the media is not telling the whole story. Okay. Our brain, most people haven't gotten to the point yet to realize our brains are doing the exact same thing. And in fact, the media's business model is make them angry, make them anxious. They'll click on the links. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they know this mechanism. They know how our brains work. They know if you want to make somebody angry, tell them 3 stories. Okay. Somebody did something bad and wrong they shouldn't have done. They hurt and harmed somebody, and they were responsible to blame 100%. When you write the story that way, people listening to it who believe it will get angry. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. As a matter of fact, a lot of times it isn't true. All right.
I mean, we've all seen examples of that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
they always leave out the other side of the story or multiple other sides of the story that may be very it may change the whole texture and context of the whole thing. You know, where they painted somebody as doing something bad and wrong. In fact, they're not. You know.
Yeah.
Or other people were doing the bad and wrong stuff, not the person who was focused on. So we know that with the media, we just need to make that, society just needs to evolve a little bit more where we start to realize, hey, our own brains are doing the same thing to us all the time, and we better get hip to it. You know, we better start questioning our own filters and our perceptions of reality, particularly when we get angry. Okay. Because there's almost always a flaw in one of those 3 things. Now, one or 2 of them may be correct or fairly correct, but if there's a flaw, it's like a 3-legged stool. If you discover that any one of the legs isn't true, okay, the whole emotion collapses. So you don't have to have all 3 being false. Any one of them will break up the emotion. But in order to find that out, you've got to start questioning what your brain is telling you is true and what your feelings are telling you is true, because the feelings come from the filters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because, so taking the media as an example, I pretty much don't watch news anymore because it depresses me, but also it distorts my thinking, I find.
Yes.
And so I live in a very happy world because I do watch the media and I think everyone's lovely and they have nothing to tell me otherwise, so it's all true. That's created my own filter for me. But how do we do that with our own brains, where we don't consciously know that we have these filters? How do we get that conscious awareness of these filters?
Well, the first thing you need to do is take those 3 filters that I just gave you, again, and everyone, write them down on an index card or a sticky note or in your cell phone somewhere. Somebody did something, just write down bad and wrong, okay? Negative impact, 100% blame.
Yeah.
Okay? Write them down. Now, what I can tell you is from this moment on, every single time you get angry, I don't care what you're angry about. You could be angry at 1,000 things. You can be angry at yourself. You can be angry at your spouse, your kids, your computer, the government, the weather, climate, whatever you want to be angry about, okay? You can be angry about anything. You pull that index card out, it'll tell you exactly the filters you're looking through. If you have anger, that's where they're coming from. You can't have anger without those 3 filters. So now you have an awareness tool that you didn't have before. Before, it was a blind spot. I got angry. I realized the external cause. I have no idea what the internal causes are. Now you know the 3 internal causes: bad and wrong, negative impact, 100% blame. Okay? So now you have the awareness of the internal causes. Now you have all the puzzle pieces on the table. Your job now is to interrogate the 3 filters, to suspect, and I actually teach, that's the word that I use, and I have a 4-step system for how to use these 3 filters. And the first one is pull out your damn index card whenever you can, and increase your awareness now of why you got angry. Okay. The second step is suspect that there's some flaws in one or more of those filters that your brain is telling you is true. They're probably not all true.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to go hunting. You have to go try to figure out, okay, where were these right? Where am I wrong? If I'm concluding that, if my conclusion is somebody did something bad and wrong, where am I off base here? Where could I have been misjudging this person or falsely judging this person or whatever? So for example, let me give you an example of my own life. So my wife and I just celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
And I can tell you that prior to my relationship with my wife, every one of my relationships in my 20s and mid-30s failed miserably. Because I had a lot of anger and a lot of other reasons too. But fortunately, I made these discoveries. I understood the 3 filters. I cured a lot of my anger. And I got rid of a lot of my anger before I met my wife. Now, she never had a lot of anger in her life. So consequently, we have not had a lot of anger in our relationship. We don't get in a lot of fights and arguments. We never did from the get-go. But there was something that happened early on in our relationship that was so unusual because we didn't have a lot of anger. We would get angry. We'd get angry at each other in this one rare circumstance. And when it happened to like the second or third time, it was so weird because when you have a baseline of like no arguments, which I know is rare, but if you're arguing all the time about stuff, one thing is going to be no different than the other. But if you're not arguing and something pops up, it's going to stick out. And it's the same thing, the same argument, same circumstance, it's going to be fairly obvious. So it turned out it only happened when we went on car trips somewhere. And it became even weirder because we wouldn't argue or fight when we were driving to our destination. We wouldn't argue while we were there for however many days we were there. It only happened when we drove home. So that's the first thing I noticed. It had a very weird pattern. It only happened when we drove home. So that made me very suspicious. I said, something fishy's going on here. So I pulled out my knowledge of the 3 filters, and I looked at it. I started, okay, let me start with the first one. So let me give you the setup. So I'd be usually driving home, and somewhere an hour into the ride or whatever, my wife would say, oh, there's something over here that I really always wanted to see, and it's only an hour off our path. Let's go let's go over here and see that. And I would go like, no, we're not doing that. And she would go like, what do you mean? No, we're not. I said, no, we're not doing that. So I would have a tone and I would have a dismissive attitude. I was, a little bit peeved that she would want to deviate from the road. And then she would get testy with me, and then we go back and forth, and that was the pattern, okay? And when I pulled out the three filters and I started with the first one, I said, okay, so I must be thinking she's doing something bad and wrong that she shouldn't be doing. Clearly I was, okay? That's not how you drive home. And then I said to myself, is it really true that she's doing something bad and wrong? And like as soon as I asked the question, I kind of knew, well, it's not really true. It's not that it's wrong. It's just different than how I think it should be done, But if I really ask myself, is it inherently bad and wrong? I said, well, not really. It's just different, And then later on, we realized that in my family, that's how we drove home. We drove directly home. We stopped for gas. We stopped for bathroom breaks. We stopped for food, but we never would deviate from our direct path home. My wife's family, she was an only child, was different. Whenever they went on a trip, they would always go for different side trips on the way home, and that was her way of doing it, So I realized that the filter that my brain was giving me that she's doing something bad and wrong was incorrect. Mm-hmm. Okay, it was actually a lie, and she wasn't doing anything bad or wrong. It was just different. From that moment on, that problem was solved. Okay.
Do you know what?
From that moment on, whenever we're driving home somewhere, whenever she wants to go off course, I say, sure, honey, if you want to go off course, let's do it. Because I'm no longer seeing it as a crime. The whole flavor of it changed because I realized that I had a false judgment about her behavior that my brain had fed me and told me was true. But it turns out when I questioned my brain and I questioned the filter, I could easily see in 30 seconds, well, wait a second, it's not really true. And a lot of times we'll do that. We'll judge people to be doing bad and wrong things when really they're just not doing them according to our standards or our, family tradition or our historical way of doing things. And if we asked, are they really wrong? They're not. Is it wrong for somebody to have an opposite political opinion from me? No, because I have an opposite one to them.
Absolutely.
So if it's okay for me, it's got to be okay for them,
I did laugh in the car story though, because my husband and I also don't argue, except for when we first started to go on trips together. But it was about the driving. So I learned to drive around London. He learned to drive in a very rural part of the UK called Herefordshire, where there's just cows and sheep, basically. I'm playing it down, but there's a lot of cows and sheep. And so I'm a very confident driver. I also was in the army, did army driving. And so I'm very relaxed. He gets quite stressed when he drives in comparison. But also we bought the first car we bought together had 6 gears, and our previous was a manual, and all his previous cars were in 5 gears. So I used to sit there as he's driving and hearing it needs to change gear, and it hasn't changed gear. I can hear the engine wanting to change gear, and I'd be like, 6th gear, 6th gear, and we'd get so annoyed at each other.
Yeah, but that annoyance comes from judging him
Absolutely.
Not realizing or being sensitive to the 6 gears as being a bad and wrong thing that he's doing. Okay?
Exactly.
When in reality, it was just how he was conditioned to drive. That was not how he grew up. By the way, I don't even know about 5 or 6 gears. The most I've ever heard of is like 3, maybe 4.
There we go. Well, I tell you, we solved the problem in 2 ways. So we agreed to never comment on each other's driving ever in the car. Mm-hmm. And now we have an automatic, so it does it all for us, and we don't think about it. So that's the only. But for the first couple of years of our marriage, it'd be like 6th gear, 6th gear, and for him, I drove too fast. So a
lot of couples have that.
Absolutely.
It's how we're conditioned, what our tendencies and habits are, and they're going to be different from our partner in a lot of ways. Okay. So, but to judge them as being wrong is a mistake most of the time. Okay,
absolutely.
Depends on what they're doing. I mean, if they're robbing a bank, that's a different story. Then it's okay to judge them as being wrong. But most of the time, it's not something where they're violating a law. They're just doing something different than we would because their conditioning is different than our conditioning.
Yeah. I want to pick on a point that you raised about people who argue a lot, and that's the normal base. Normal people get angry a lot specifically. So I'm like you. I'm a very chilled out person. I don't really get angry very often. And if I do, then I normally, in my mind, there's normally a reason for it, but it's like once every 10 years I get angry.
Mm-hmm.
But I find it, as an onlooker, exhausting seeing people who are constantly angry. But I also know that you get used to those behaviors, that they become your pattern of normality.
Well,
So
I think that's why it happens. That's partly why it happens, because
exactly.
people get the idea that you're supposed to do that in a relationship.
Yeah.
And maybe maybe in their family, when they grow up as kids, their parents argued all the time. So now they have this model, conscious or unconscious, but a lot of it's unconscious.
Absolutely.
That the way two people demonstrate loving each other is that they fight all the time. Okay. Now, obviously, in a relationship, there's always going to be opportunities to fight all the time, because you're going to be bumping up against the differences between the two of you all the time. Different desires, different attitudes, different tastes. So you could always complain and argue if you want to. But if you have it in the back of your mind that equals a healthy relationship, then you're going to do it because you think that's what you have to do, or what society is saying is the norm. When it's really, like you say, you and I have relationships where we hardly argue at all with our partners. And a lot of people think that's like Martian behavior, that you're not in the real world. Well, we are. We just don't get caught up as maybe we have some intuitive understanding of these three filters, that we don't get caught up in the, quote, truthfulness of them all the time. So we're not angry. We may not like what's going on, but we don't get angry about it. We don't fight about it. We're not trying to change the other person or fix the other person, which partly comes into it. Because again, it's the idea, if you are critical, that the person will change their behavior, and that's part of what drives the anger. So there are a lot of other things, including the fact that a lot of people feel like if they have a lot of anger in their lives, they're just stuck with it and there's nothing they can do. Okay, but we're talking right now about all the things you can do to lessen anger and to eliminate anger, actually. And if you'd asked me in my 20s and 30s, do I think there's any probability that I would stop being an angry person, given all the things I tried that didn't work? Okay, I would have said no. That's just my DNA. That's just my personality. That's just how I am. It's probably always going to be that way. And I would have firmly believed that. Like I shouldn't even try anymore because it's not going to happen. Okay. But then I was fortunate enough to have those experiences that I had in personal development work, where it opened up all new doors for me. And then all of a sudden, like when I look back, like, oh my God, I can't believe I actually did that. I didn't believe it was possible for me or anybody else. And then once it happened for me, then I asked me, could I teach other people to have these same kinds of miraculous breakthroughs? And yeah, I've been able to do that. It's not that hard. So this whole idea that you're stuck with your anger, if you've got it, you just got to manage it as best you can and put up with it as best you can, is crazy. It's crazy.
Absolutely.
You can absolutely get rid of it. And the way you start is you understand the missing puzzle pieces that those people who are arguing all the time are not aware of that they're self-generating their anger, and their brain is lying to them and giving them false filters whenever they're angry. If they knew that, they would start correcting the mistakes that they're making in their perceptions, and they would stop getting angry as often. But they don't know that because people aren't teaching it. They aren't talking. They aren't having shows like this where that reality gets exposed. And where they can hopefully get curious, to learn more about it and all that kind of stuff, which is what you have to do.
Absolutely. I think the point you made really, really clear there, really important, is that anybody can change. Yeah. And I love the fact about all the advancements in science. We understand that actually our behaviors aren't fixed, our patterns aren't fixed. Neuroplasticity, we can change anything, any behavior, but it's that awareness and willingness to try. And I think in relationships when both couples are used to arguing, it sometimes has to be one person who makes the shift first, and then the other person goes, hang on, they're not engaging in the same way, what's going on here? And then you can both start to shift. You can't get ahead of me. I need to catch exactly up. Yeah, I need to be calm too.
Yes. But it's funny, I've been teaching this for 40 years. In the beginning there was a longer program, but in the last couple of years I boiled it down to a 10-session program. So I can do like this. I can do 10 Zoom calls like this once a week for 10 weeks. And I've taken people, in their 50s and 60s who've been angry all their lives. Nothing's helped them. They've tried all kinds of different things. They've come into my 10-session program, all right? At the end of 10 one-hour sessions, they're like completely different human beings. They've stopped getting angry as often as they used to. They know the 3 filters. They know where their anger is coming from. They know how to use the 3 filters to make their anger disappear. They are like incredible breakthroughs. It's not hard, folks. But you need to have somebody who knows how to do it to teach you, because it's not natural. It doesn't, and then we don't have the role models in society or the educational inputs in society to make it happen. So I created that program. I've been teaching that program, and I recently wrote a book called Dr. Orman's Life-Changing Anger Cure, which you can find on Amazon. And I teach everything I teach in that 10-session program. So you don't even have to go to the 10-session program anymore and spend the money. That was a considerable amount of money for people to do that. You just go get the book and study it, and it goes into much more detail about the 3 filters and the whole process of how anger happens and how you can literally undo any anger problem that you currently have. And it talks about what my life was like when I had all this anger, and how what the steps were for me to have my own personal breakthrough 30 or 40 years ago. What actually caused it, and what were the pieces that I learned, or the things that I discovered. And that's 6 or 7 chapters in the second part of the book that explain that. And then we go into all the things you need to know about anger and understand about human beings and anger. And while the whole book focuses on anger, it's actually not just about anger. It's about every emotion that we have. You could be talking about anxiety. It's the same process. It's just 3 different filters. The only thing you have to change is the filters, but it's the same. Everything else is the same in how the emotion gets created and what you can do to stop it from being a problem in your life or causing problems in your life. It's the same system. It's the same. Make an index card, put the 3 filters on it. When you have that emotion, pull out the card. Okay, now my blind spot's cured. I can see what's going on. Now I have to question these things and see if there's any flaws in any of these filters, how I'm perceiving the situation. And sure enough, if you go looking, you'll find them.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you so much. If people want to find you, obviously your book's on Amazon, we'll put a link to it in the show notes. Where can they find you?
Well, the best thing they can do is I have a handout, a short PDF handout called The Best Anger Elimination Method you can find, what we've been talking about. And you can get that and download that for free at theangersolution.org. Theangersolution.org. And that'll get you that PDF. And I talk about anger a little bit more. I talk about my 10-session program. And I also talk about the book a little bit in there and at the end of it. And it has a link to Amazon where you can get the book if you want. And it also gets you on my email list. I send out emails every week where I pick a topic each week related to stress or anger, and I break it into 3 parts. And I do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday serial kind of blog. It's like a serial blog post. And I said, so you can get on my email list. You can email me and communicate if you want to. That's really the best way to do it.
And I am on your email list, so I can recommend the emails to everybody as well, having read them.
Yeah, I've been doing that since 2011. So, 14 years now. And I have some people have been on that list ever since the beginning, where they just enjoy getting them. And a lot of people rave about, what they learned from them and all that kind of stuff.
It's good value, really good value.
Yeah.
So there we go. Dr. Mort, thank you ever so much. It's been such a pleasure and privilege, and I look forward to following your journey and learning from you more.
All right. Well, it's been great meeting you, and I'm happy to share this information with your audience. So thank you.
Thank you.